All right. Well, thank you very much. Yes, I'm Darrin Reynolds, and happy to be back. Love coming to this event. Thank you to the sponsors and the organizers for putting. This is such an excellent venue, and the treatment is top notch. So you are all in for a treat. Up here, we have a fabulous panel, and I'll introduce them very briefly, but I think you're going to get to know a little bit more about them as we get into it. This is a panel, and of course, this would be totally unacceptable and pointless if we didn't have also your input. And so my job here is to make it provocative and maybe even contentious and see what we can stir up. And I've got three great brains to do that. Right here to my immediate left is Hussein Syed, CISO for RJWBarnabas Health. Next to him, Richard Rushing, CISO for Motorola Mobility. And on the end, we have Tellis Williams, CISO for AXA Partners. Now, that's different industries represented here. And so I've tried to find some things that may bring their expertise together in a way. And when I was a kid, we would catch bugs, and then you put them in a jar and you shake it to make them fight, see who could survive. So this is a cage match.
Is this like Thunderdome or something? One may enter, three enter, one may leave?
Yeah, so
okay.
Cage match, it's full on.
We're good.
So between these guys and their smarts, if this was a bowl of chili, it is all kinds of spicy. That's where we're headed here. So buckle up. Now, I promised to be easy. I'm going to throw out a softball question. When you talk about what happened last year or what's happened since, the first thing that comes to mind is, oh my gosh, what are the big giant breaches and what are, those are interesting, but I want to ask each of them to introduce themselves, and if you wouldn't mind, throw out maybe a favorite data point, either of help us understand your industry, your organization, your vertical, whatever, or also help us to understand, do you have a favorite statistic from last year that really stands out? I'll start with you, Hussein.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Hussein. I'm with RJWBarnabas Health. Been there for about 17 years. Lifer in healthcare. As part of this favorite statistic, I guess I would say healthcare, prime target, record high fines from OCR, record number of data points lost, pediatric records, probably the most expensive black market commodity you can purchase.
My name is Richard Rushing. I'm CISO for Motorola Mobility. I've been CISO for Motorola and Motorola Mobility for now over 11 years. So I should have died like 3 times by now on that side of it. So I'm a really good, strong bug. You can shake the glass all you want. I think one of the contention points or one of the aspect points is that even from a large corporate entity, the folks out of Iran that were running the Samsung virus that locked up a couple of cities and a lot of other things, from a technology perspective, they were accepting Bitcoins, and there's only 3. That was it for most of the organizations they were targeting, was around 3 Bitcoins in those scenarios that were there. Well, the wallet they had chosen had, when all the prosecution came down on it, had over 13,000 Bitcoins in it at one time. And so they were targeting directly for small, medium-sized businesses because that was the soft spot. Yeah. Didn't have the security controls, didn't have some of the capabilities, didn't have the people, and would always pay the ransom. And so that was their soft spot, to the tune of well over 3,000 places got all their data locked up and had to come back with the results. So as you can see, that it doesn't affect the big corporations as a backbone, it affects everything across the board, and I think that's one of the big data points from last year.
Tellis Williams, I'm the CISO for AXA Partners USA. I've been there for 4 years, feels like 30. So I'm the new guy, but
are you telling me I'm old? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
You around when Jesus was here?
Oh, yeah.
I know you were.
Yeah. Knew him personally. But one thing from the year that I'm actually pretty proud of is being able to help mature the organization, add those other controls. One big thing is being able to embed security in every aspect of the not just in IT, but every aspect in the business, so that we're covering those three towers. That's important. It also dramatically cut down on the things that my security team had to tear down by just embedding them. SDLC is one of those aspects, right? But embedding them at the beginning of the process. And being able to hire the appropriate persons for that particular task. Not just throwing a security person at development, for instance, but throwing a security person at development that also have a development background. Same thing from the infrastructure side. So those are some things that in this past year, I'm really proud that we were able to do, and we're seeing really good results.
All right, well, thank you. Welcome aboard. And as we get into this, one of the things that I think comes across every time you look at the year in review, big breaches. Last year, we can think of Marriott, Equifax, Yahoo, Facebook. Some of the elements of those are fascinating. There's been a number of reports that comes out. One of my favorite little data points was we had 12 breaches right off the bat that had over 100 million records each compromised. So I think that speaks a little bit to the capabilities and maybe even the increased focus of the bad guys, as Phil likes to tell us. So in that mix, I think one of the topics that comes up is, gosh, if everyone's still in the headlines, is it time to buy cyber insurance? 68% of that market has yet to do so. And I hope you get to it. You said something brilliant earlier. I'm not going to steal your thunder. I really liked it. But the questions that come to mind is it time to buy? Is it a good buy? Where do we go with this? How do we know what is a good coverage? And I think on the other side of that, the insurance companies, and we have one represented here, are also thinking, gosh, how much do we charge for this? This is a new, novel, Wild West era of one of the protections of our world, risk transferring. And so I'll just kind of open it up to you, whoever wants to stick their foot in that pool first. But what about cyber insurance? Where are we? What should we be doing?
Go ahead.
Yeah, cyber insurance is extremely important. There are some problems with cyber insurance at this point in that the insurance field doesn't really understand what those risks are because they don't. They're reluctant to put their foot out there for it as much as they should. So you don't have a cyber insurance company that will cover the amount of money necessary to handle any of your risks. You usually have to get a group of insurance companies together and then try to cover it that way. Or they're insuring to a certain level, then another company comes in and insure after that. Problem though, it's really easy to disqualify the claim because you have to, as the insured, you have to have covered all of your basic due diligence. Most of us are still trying to fight the issue of getting everyone to follow the appropriate due diligence, which means you can be paying all of that money out to the insurance companies and you're not going to get a return when something happens. You're not going to get that return because your stuff isn't together yet. So that's one of the pitfalls that we have. The analogy that I used earlier was that even with car insurance, if you're a good driver, you absolutely want car insurance. The guy that's driving drunk every day doesn't really give a care because even if he's in an accident, you're not going to get covered. Same issue.
Yep.
True. I think CISOs are not the right people to answer the insurance question. It's the enterprise risk management group in an organization. The reason I think most organizations don't have cyber insurance, they probably don't have other insurances either, because they don't have an ERM group that does the risk management exercise, quantify the risk, bring it to the board level, decide what type of coverage is needed, and where it's needed, and how it would be applied.
Yeah, I think it was last year before you started getting the turn downs from the cyber insurance space, there was the question of whose budget is going to pay for this. And that was a big question because the premiums were going up through the roof for the amount of coverage that you were actually getting. And you started questioning that you're going to take, in some cases, it was a third of some security organization's budget to pay for the cyber insurance. So what do you want me to stop doing at that point in time? What do I want to not do or get rid of? And you had some board members basically go, well, I can take all the risk and transfer it to cyber insurance, and I don't have to worry about spending extra dollars on it. And soon they discovered it's like, whoops, wrong decisions process on that side of it. When Mondelez and a couple of other organizations got, hey, this is an act of war, too bad, not covered, everybody went, oh, this is something no one thought of on that side of it, and how's it going to play out? And so that's a whole court case battle, as well as some of the other cases, and it's kind of in the new area. I think personally, from a perspective of insurance, is that it's something just like any other piece of security. It would be kind of not smart necessarily to say I don't want it, but definitely, to your point, incorporate it inside, understand what the deductibles are, understand that, yes, that questionnaire is to be filled out with due diligence, not, hey, give this to the intern and have him check the check boxes with that. Because somewhere there's going to be a responsible party that said, hey, yeah, we're covered under this. And then, oops, you said you had encryption, but you lost the employee's laptop, therefore it doesn't, so it's not covered. And you're back at square zero.
Yeah, and I think the business disruption committees are the place to start. They are the ones that have to understand the impact of the business. Every insurance has to have a benefit. So the benefit for cyber insurance would be, it'll be part of a disruption committee's decision of what risk appetite they have and how much they can withstand, what they can self-insure and what they need to extend out to an insurance broker to farm out and get a tiered policy or one policy, however that works out to be. IT security in particular will just provide a technical risk assessment of the policy requirements. There's HR implications to cyber policy that needs to be filled out by the HR, background checks, what level of, things that need to take place, and then the business has to chime in and say, what type of controls they have in the business processes, and how that could potentially cause a cyber incident. You can have encryption, you can have password, multi-factor authentication, you name it, and all the controls can be railed off. But if they're not properly managed, there's going to be a failure, and there's going to be a denial and claim. Is it IT security that's going to be held accountable, or is it the business that's going to be held accountable for failure to
answer.
make it?
So perhaps this is a product that is suffering from the wrong name.
Yeah.
And I noticed that your comparison here to business continuity planning, that always somehow ended up on some IT person's desk when it's completely inappropriate. There's a tiny little piece in there called disaster recovery. Do you have backup tapes and things like that they can answer? But the whole big picture of business continuity doesn't belong in front of the IT department. Perhaps the decision making around cyber insurance, similar fate then.
Yeah. Well, there's one other element I like to add too. It's a lack of understanding on our side as to what causes that rate, that insurance rate to get so high. I too thought that was based on what your risk was. It's not. Your risks in the organization, your controls in the organization dictate whether or not you get the insurance. Your insurance rate is based on how many records you have. So if you have all of these records, but they're the same record, just duplicated all over the place, you're now paying that many times for that portion for that record, right? So our rates are through the roof because we don't understand it ourselves.
Yeah, and I think this goes to the heart of that. It's fairly new, just like anything else is new. And if you think about it from a health perspective, anybody over the age of 50, and I'm not naming names or anything else on that side of it, if I tried to get medical coverage, I have to have somebody do blood pressure, blood test, et cetera, with that before they'll actually give me the insurance and the rate that's actually there. And there is no due diligence on the other side. We have a self-assessed questionnaire that says, yes, if that was the case, it would be like, hey, I'm perfectly healthy, this, that. My cholesterol is like 5, and we'll go from there. Those are the things that it's going to mature over a period of time. And it's going to have to weigh out in court. It's going to have to weigh out in the marketplace. And we'll see what actually happens in the future with it.
You said that insurance companies are not in the business of paying claims, right?
Well, he's from the insurance company. I wasn't
Yeah.
going to put words in his mouth, but they're not in the business of paying claims out because they're in the business of making money.
Yeah, in the business of collecting fees. They're not in the business of, in fact, in most insurance companies, the largest department is the department that's there to reject you, right? There are assessors. That's in every insurance company. The objective is to make as much capital as we can without paying out as much as we can, as little as we can.
All right, well, that just ruined my day.
Sorry.
But I think we all knew that. I think there's a sneaky, suspicious side to this that we all sort of are supposed to know that already. That you're not necessarily the good hands helping us out of the mire that we got ourselves into. And I like that idea that if you're asking for insurance, either it's you've already done all your due diligence and you're ready to go and you're a good risk, or it's because you know you haven't done any of that and this is a last resort. So just the fact of asking for insurance on this side means I shouldn't give you one. But all right. Now, by the end of this year, the percentage of women in the CISO crowd is expected to grow, he's making giant air quotes, to 20%. Yes. Now, my question to this group is, what in the world can we do to accelerate that if we absolutely believe that we will benefit from the diversity of viewpoints and different experiences in our own industry? What's going on here?
So let me start that. And I'm going to give you an example of where that diversity is very important. I was at an event similar to this. I think there were 7 or 8 CISOs in a circle. 2 were women. As the question circled the group, the men all had the same response. Fire the guy. I think my response was chop him in the throat or something like that. But the 2 women gave a totally different perspective, right? We had the group think going on. But the 2 women gave a perspective of, no, you're just using them in the wrong place. This person had talents over on this side, right? But just think of it. We would have had that one perspective without the perspective coming from somewhere else. That diversity is absolutely needed. Right? The bad guys, they have no problem with bringing a woman or anyone else in. And I think part of the problem is on our side for diversity. You know, guys sometimes like locker room talk. That's cowardice, though. It's cowardice because as we're doing all this speaking, I don't want a woman around for that. That is an absolutely cowardice approach to doing business. And it's not productive.
I think it's going to be a challenge because, like anything else, it's going to take its course. Until opportunities are created and acceptance is done to allow more people to come into the field and stop having those backroom conversations, people will see a benefit. A young woman would not want to work in a department that's got all men, cracking sexist jokes, right? There's an element of acceptance too, and then creating opportunities and diversifying, looking for a computer science graduate with microprocessor or whatnot, as opposed to saying, I'm going to open it up and I'm going to bring in IS people or finance, or somebody says psychology or sociology majors where other, diversity excels. Have them come in and train them to be in the risk management or in the DLP or any other areas. Utilize that data to make better decisions, but open up opportunities. I think it's a growing field as it is. Cybersecurity or security in general hasn't even flourished to the level it needs to. CISOs are just getting accepted to the boardrooms, right? Not have a table in the boardroom, just are accepted, right? So by the time it gets to that level, hopefully there'll be more diversity and more inclusion of all kinds of folks.
No, I think it's one of the things. It's not going to change overnight. I wish it would. Snap of a fingers and do stuff. It's going to be somewhere between 4 and 8 years. You can accelerate the process in a lot of cases. From the talk today, get rid of the unicorn analysis. This is who I want. Diversity in the place. Look outside for these people. that are training, ex-military, prime example of people that can be trained up to do stuff, and that are coming out that want to do things. So I think it's up to each one of us as well as a group to try to do it. I also strongly look at replacing senior folks with the same thing. If I'm coming into an organization and I look up the reporting structure and there's not anybody above me that's there, it's going to be a short-term process that's around that, because no one, it's like the same thing would be that no one's going to, what's my career path? And that's one of the key things that you really have to show that, yes, that's there, and it's perfectly doable. There's nothing wrong on that side of it that's there. And even as long as you open up to some of the things and stop searching for, oh, I need the person that has done SIM integration, this, that, the other side of it that's there, that has 25 years worth of experience that's there. The person doesn't exist anymore. Or if he does, please raise your hand, because then there's everybody else that wants to know who was that person on that side of it that's there. So yeah, anybody says you have a really good people, that raise your hand, and they never do that in an open room. With that.
Without a doubt, we're pigeonholing ourselves.
Yeah, I point the point at anybody that has a job description that's out and been in the marketplace longer than 90 days, your job description is wrong with that. You're either too closed, or your salary's too low to be looking for stuff on that side of it.
Or you're looking for talent outside of your organization, because the best people you can recruit are the people who know your business and can help you protect the business. Healthcare, health IT is predominantly female nurses that graduate into health IT, CNIOs and others. But if you look at the leadership, in most places you find male-dominated leadership. Yet the workforce is quite a bit of females there. I think we try to go out and recruit within our health system, see if we can bring in people into security from IT or health IT or even business areas who are willing to learn, so that we can create that, not only that we need to make them, and they know the business, they can help understand or make decisions that are business-centric as opposed to security-centric. Lock down all USB ports, don't let anybody copy any data, right? Next thing you know, they've copied that data on their laptop, take it home and put it on Box or Dropbox. Workaround is worse than the control. So understanding the business, but if you bring in the people that work there, that's how you diversify the workforce.
One other thing that we have to do from an attacking diversity, why diversity becomes so important, we all have shortages. We have huge shortages of staff. I think it's because we look for persons with particular background, but I think we need to look outside of that now. For instance, for security awareness and for training. Mm-hmm. I don't look for security people for that anymore. I look for teachers. Yeah. Why? Because teachers understand the concept of teaching and how to structure the program. The information within it, they don't have to know it. They do have to know how to teach it, though, and how to organize a program around it. For completing our assessments. Yeah. I want an accountant. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can sit there all day. None of the security people want to sit there and do that all day. In fact, that's a quick way to get rid of that staff. You usually have to move them around to other staff members so that one person doesn't feel overburdened with that. Bring an accountant in, that guy likes to do that all day. So we have to start looking outside of our traditional areas of expertise and find the talent, because it's necessary.
So bald spots, ponytails, and black T-shirts.
With the funny smells.
Don't
get
put
rid
that
of those
in
guys.
the job description.
That's it.
Well, we have machine learning and artificial intelligence will solve all the problems.
There we go. All right. Now, this may be uncomfortable for one of you in particular, but it seems to me the idea of ransomware really takes a beating when it gets to the healthcare world. Maybe it's just my observation, but there seems to be more ransomware, or at least reports of it, in the healthcare world. And in fact, there was a study done just recently that said we're expecting to see ransomware in healthcare accelerate 5 times what it is today, just in the next couple of years.
It's a media hype.
So
Didn't
stop
Rick
using
just
XP.
explain that most of the ransomware was consumer-based and very little was enterprise-based? But yes, the few organizations that have been hit with ransomware, some elected not to pay and some elected to pay. And it's again, risk-based decision. You can't knock them for one or the other. But yeah, the problem with healthcare is, the media has hyped it up, and now the bad guys know that there is an opportunity to capitalize to target the healthcare.
So it's
market,
almost
right?
self-fulfilling at that point. Because I've reported it, it gets more attention. And
Yes, so OCR has its own, way of a wall of shame or whatnot, and then, everybody knows that XYZ organization had a breach and had to report it. Why don't they have that for the banks? Why don't they have for the marketing companies? I guess the largest breach stemmed from a marketing company, right? Some 400 million records exposed. They did not have to report it to anybody. Did you receive a letter from a marketing company saying that, wow, we were collecting your data and you were breached?
You click that OK.
But,
We're
so
sticking to that.
You're right. There is a risk, and healthcare organizations are trying to do whatever they can.
And I think it goes back to the same thing. Criminals are smart. Let's be honest. They're organized too. So they look at it as like, where are our targets? Well, places that can't live without their data. With that, so financial, healthcare are some of the stuff. Because other people are just like, well, I can take whatever I got and I can just go back to that. But other services around that, they're going to do it. And they're targeting this. Again, their job is to make money as well. Illicitly, but yes. And again, it's the cybercrime. It's the #1 criminal activity on the planet today. So guess what? Everybody is potentially a target. They're focusing in on the other side of it because they know that companies that have diverse numbers of people, you have doctors that work at multiple sets of hospitals and everything else, just like you have contractors that work at multiple places as well. And so all of these things that come together kind of perform that perfect storm that says those are the targets that are the best targets that we actually have, that we can get something in and lock everything up and we get paid. At the end of the day, their job is to get paid. So if they find somebody that's not going to pay them, they're not interested in doing that anymore.
I think and some of the healthcare organizations have made the right decision not to pay, even though they ended up spending a lot more to rebuild their environment. I think, again, the ones that have paid probably had the right reasons to pay. And the ones that didn't pay had the capital to invest so that they would be able to recover from that calamity. But again, I still go back to the argument that the law should apply equally to every organization. And then you would know that the healthcare is probably facing the same challenges any other organization is facing and getting breached. Some have to report and some don't.
And it's taking advantage of the circumstances as well. Right? Healthcare is just now really made an effort within the last 6-7 years of digitizing all of their data. So now they're converting systems. They still have a lot of older systems in place, which makes it easier for breaches. They go back with with vulnerabilities that were low and medium vulnerabilities back in 10 years ago. Those now become your threat vectors because the systems will still have a few of those in there as they make this conversion. The bad guys know that these conversions are going on. But then when you look at the dollar amount per, so for an identity, to your identity related to credit card information, the range is $0 to $30 per identity. For healthcare records, it's $0 to $1,500.
Oh, wow.
As a bad guy, who am I going at? I'm going at health.
$500. Pediatric is about $500 a record.
Yeah.
And adult, like richest, would probably be $20.
Richest, yeah.
They're like, you're going to die here soon. Again.
well, and part of that is, I think, the difference between health data and credit card data is shelf life.
Absolutely.
Credit card, if my credit card is compromised, well, that's a bummer.
You're right. So when the fraud detection processes in detecting fraudulent claim processing gets matured and better, healthcare would not be a target then.
Yeah.
As much,
Right now, healthcare claims take about 30 to 60 days to process, right? So, and if the companies have proper mechanism in place to detect whether it's a fraudulent claim or a real claim. That's where the monetization happens. It doesn't happen at the provider space. Very few people walk in with stolen, purchased identity or insurance information to actually get treatment at the house. It's usually at the other side where, they can make a claim, process it, and get paid and be gone by the time it's detected that that was a stolen identity.
Yeah.
So I think by the time that process gets fixed, the value of the record will start to go
Yeah,
down.
you have questions in the pre-certification. Wait, you've already had your appendix out once before.
Yeah.
Or twice.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of it is, though, not just, because you're absolutely right, the fraud piece, ultimately it means nothing if it's not monetized. But when my credit card is compromised, I get a new credit card number. I'm not going to get new drug allergies, blood types, diagnoses based on, my own health record just because it was compromised. So the shelf life is longer because it is more meaningful, more relevant.
It is. I mean, and some of that has to do with a little bit of privacy, but more to do with, how quickly can you prevent a fraud from taking place.
Well, now, I may have heard the phrase, this is the golden age of hacking. I don't know when it started or when it will end, but I hear that a lot. The golden age of hacking, to me, it means there's just a vast asymmetry in the defense versus attack. It's so much easier to attack than it is to defend. That I hope it's our job to fix and change that. But is healthcare more at risk because of legacy systems, because of sometimes older tech, or the difference in mission? We're here to save lives, not necessarily improve, infrastructure as perhaps a tech company might be.
That challenge will always be there. So high value diagnostic equipment has a life cycle of 15 to 20 years, right? Because they're so expensive, they take so long to develop, produce, market.
Have to be certified.
FDA certifications and all that other training, physician preference of what they need to use, what they've been trained on. There's a lot of other dynamics that play in the fact that before you can go and buy either Philips, Siemens, or GE or some, cutting edge medical equipment that's built and be used for some special purpose. What is maturing in the healthcare area is the same things that financials and others did: endpoint security, segmentation, user awareness, access control, lifecycle management of identity, and other things that are principles that are existent and are being adopted by healthcare now. I think as time goes on, healthcare organizations are going to get just as mature. They will never be as safe as a bank. If you have not worked in healthcare, you would not understand how complex health information technologies are.
Yeah.
You walk into a hospital, you get registered. Your data goes to an EHR. Physicians and nurses look at it there. Based on the complaint, they say whether it's a radiology lab or further testing or whatnot, that data goes to another system there. That's where the testing is done. Then the radiologist or the pathologist reads that, enters the information there, and then it goes back to the EHR, and that's just a treatment phase. When you go into the claim processing in EMR, then a whole other set of systems are involved. We are not talking about one system where a credit card application goes in, and they talk to Equifax, and they say, all right, this guy scores 520 or whatever, deny the application. Or he's a great risk taker, let's just give him a credit card. Here, it's a totally different process. I think that's never going to change. There's more integrated systems now. Cerner's, Epics, and Allscripts, they're creating better integrated systems, but there will still be some systems that will have to be communicated through.
And I think it's not only just for the healthcare. We went through the same life cycle as organizations, where, if you remember right, we had the browser of choice, which used to be like IE6. Why? Because one system inside your whole organization needed access to use IE6, therefore everybody used IE6 across the board, regardless of that. And that changed when we started segmenting those things off. No more XP, got thrown out of the window. No more Windows 7, got thrown away. Server 2003. We've gone through this to say if we still have to use these antiquated technologies or older legacy type systems, we have best practices around that to start segmenting those things off. And I think we've matured as an organization and,
We're getting there. Yeah.
as well to say, hey, no, this was fine ages ago, but we saw what the results were. And we said, okay, we can't do this anymore. And I think everyone has moved to the same kind of model. And in healthcare's case, they just have a huge number of these disparate systems. There's not what you want to call an integration platform or a big ERP move to say, hey, put it all in one place because of that environment.
But that will stifle research, right?
Yeah.
You want to allow people to build better systems that will do niche-based services. But I tell you that there's a huge, stark difference between healthcare organizations 5 years ago than it is today.
Absolutely.
We do the same thing now, reporting to the board, educating the board, getting their feedback because they sit on other boards and they come back and they ask the same questions. And we have to provide the same response.
All right. So, my past, I was Chief Privacy Officer at Omnicom. This is one of the big advertising conglomerates of the world. And I noticed at the time a shift, if not in investment, at least in influence, from the CIO's camp to the Chief Marketing Officer's camp. And what it sort of signaled was there's a potential new wave coming of, gosh, we've been funding the CIO for a really long time, our IT investments and technology, and yet the bad things still happen. And then we had to call in marketing and PR and reputation management firms. Is there room to argue that it might make sense to just cut our throats right now here publicly and say, yeah, we might be better off with, in spending some of that effort and time and influence and money over there in the marketing camp? Because, like we said earlier, it's not, you don't get judged by when you get breached, it's how you respond. So maybe if we just beef up our responses right now with some social media and others, what do you think of it?
I think it's one of the things that you can characterize this. Be sure to use marketing's money before you use your own. And simply, easiest way to do that is go, we got to get involved in reputation and to reaching out. So we want to be okay because of the policy, according to our policy, it says you will not talk to reporters, this, that, the other thing. We need that exclusion that says security people can talk to reporters and marketing will freak out at that point in time and then offer to pay so they don't have to. But I think it's one of the things you really have to do this. If you're not doing it now, because the tweetiverse, Twitterverse, whatever you wish to call it, life cycle is 24 hours. And we've seen with CEOs that tweet stock price sharing, how they can get into danger with SEC and everything else around the same perspective. The same thing goes for attacks and everything else. The idea that you can't say anything is dead today. Because it's like, no comment. Okay, we can't comment on that. Fine, we'll just run with the story. Thank you very much. And that the story's out there. Go look and say cyber breach, no comment, and see how many stories pop up on that side of it. So you really have to have that. And once it starts and gets the thing, if you don't kind of kill it or contain it, it gets a life of its own, and then it's gone. It's off to the races. No matter how much money you spend on reputation, no matter that you now have 400,000 social media posts that people are complaining about your product or your service, or are you going to get them money? They want to know nothing. You haven't said anything across the board, and you're doomed to this cycle. And if you're not actively doing that on a regular basis, even if you have retainers, you grab everybody together and put it there, it's 3 weeks before somebody can actually do something. This has to be a daily kind of occurrence of monitoring social media. And the marketing company knows that. They already have all these things. Just work with them to try to integrate and say, hey, we want to use you for reputation and things along that nature so that we don't get blindsided by this and how we would work a program. Because, again, your customer service reps that are doing social media coordination and coming back online, those are not the people you really want to talk to hackers or reporters.
I'll just direct you to the Gartner report. That was published a month ago. Out of the 12 or 21 breaches, there were only 5 CISOs fired. The rest are CEOs, CFOs, and CIOs, so the money can move around wherever it needs to. It'll find its way back to controls.
Okay. And in the meantime, we can create opportunity for others to
Yeah.
move up.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. It behooves us to.
So that comes from having and for everyone in the organization understanding their role in security, aligning themselves with security, understanding that this is part of their positions. You know, one thing we did is to perform business impact analysis across the entire organization. One element that we added in was reputation. What is the impact reputation, right? By adding that, it allowed the other elements of the business to understand that, wait a minute, we're going to get hit by this too. It's not just an IT problem. And for the longest time, IT or security, you know, it's your problem to do the security. It's your problem. And it's easier to cast it over there than to understand that you're a part of that and you become a vulnerability yourself.
Yeah, but if you look at the adaptive security model, right, and whoever created it, it's prepare, detect, respond, and follow up. So you have to have some controls in each area, and that's the risk assessment process. You can identify where the focus needs to be.
Well, and it gets it off our plate, and it gets our necks off the chopping block at the appropriate junctures where we're not experts in everything.
But again, through the maturity cycle, I think that's realization that's already happening now, right? You know, now you don't see the security manager getting fired, or the CISO. The ramifications are large and far, right? When a large-scale breach were to happen, and luckily there are not that many happening. But I think that is also. I think the correction will also itself happen.
Well, we're almost out of time. Come on. Do you guys have any questions, curiosities? Right over here. Okay.
It's been recorded.
No, this is
It's streamed.
this is what you guys were talking about.
Yeah.
The CISO should never be fired because the CISO doesn't own the risk there. So let's just say that bluntly.
No, most of, not even bluntly, most of the time, most of the breaches that occur are not around some security tool that's failing.
Sure.
On that side of it. It's about somebody accepted the risk and they know it.
Right.
And that's why the crash happened.
No, and I'm not saying you guys were saying that. I'm just saying that out loud because unfortunately the tendency is to blame the cop for the crime.
Right.
As the expression goes.
You're right, but it's a lot of times it's the process. You know, there was a large health system that had a ransomware situation because they didn't patch the JBoss server
Right.
for their application. Not a CISO's problem. It's really an IT problem, right?
That's right.
IT should have followed the process of making sure when they were notified, patch, maybe CISOs should have had an auditability in place to say, there's a risk here, you know, X% of high value assets are not properly secured. Yeah, but in the case where, you know, a breach took place because somebody left their BlackBerry or unsecured laptop somewhere, that's not a CISO's problem.
Well, when it comes to locus of control and funding, which are typically the two biggest areas that drive that type of event, unfortunately, yeah, it falls well outside of the CISO's power. I think if we could self-budget, that'd be a glorious day. But
Yeah.
haven't incurred that situation yet.
Keep hope alive.
Yeah. Oh, that's the golden unicorn.
You can have your own ransomware, lock up the CEO's laptop. You'll discover how quickly your budget gets released. Oh, did I say that out loud? Sorry.
Well,
Let's record it again.
That is if the CISO uses it.
Is that my new approach?
I'll write that one down for later use. Thanks.
Thanks. I'll probably make an unpopular statement, and it partly makes to your comment of we can't know everything, and partly to the comment that was just made that the CISO shouldn't be fired. We want to be business leaders, which means we need to be accountable for the business result and the outcome, regardless of where it lays in the corporation. A CEO gets fired for not delivering a business outcome, and there's a lot of externalities that they can't control in the market, competitors, suppliers, disruption. We own it. Don't deflect it. If you deflect it, you're not a business leader.
No, totally agree. We complained for years about not having the seat at the table, and the reason we didn't have the seat at the table was because we didn't have anything to offer. So when you have the seat at the table, you're expected to show up. The sales guy is bringing in revenue. The marketing guy is trying to sell the other guy's products, the other product people. Everybody brings in something. You got to bring in that I will make sure everything is secure and we're not going to make bad decisions in this process. If you're like, I'm going to push this to the business leaders and the business groups and everything else, you'll never get a seat at the table.
Well, Malcolm saying, try to fit in those big boy pants.
Yeah.
I'd like to,
Or girl. Just to be clear.
I'd like to focus in back on the healthcare discussions that happen. I think hospitals are in a somewhat unique position. Maybe they're not the only ones, but they're certainly great examples of companies whose, I'll call them employees, but not really employees, doctors and outside nurses and so on, have to have access to the special data, but they're not employees. And I think as they try to do things like single sign-on or multi-factor authentication, all these things, it becomes a great challenge. And I don't think the healthcare organizations have done enough to push the message out to the security product developers that they have needs that have to encompass people that don't have credentials for the hospital, but use other equipment.
If you can solve the healthcare access issue, you can solve any organization's contractor, third party, fourth party, fifth party structure if you can solve a hospital, which I think you're bringing up an excellent point.
You do, but it's a trade-off, right, between giving access at the right time or not giving access at the right time and letting somebody die because my password policy was so strict that, you know, he couldn't get in.
Yeah.
Right?
13 characters.
Two more comments.
But it's getting there. You know, there are companies out there that are healthcare focused on single sign-on and process and workflow oriented, where just-in-time pop-up for secondary authentication if you're, you know, diagnosed or prescribing narcotics as opposed to prescribing regular drugs. So all those things it takes time to change those things. It's getting there, but it'll be a while.
The healthcare industry has a lot to do.
Yeah.
Well, so in healthcare, seconds are the difference between life and death, right?
Yeah.
That's something that the healthcare industry has that many other industries do.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to focus on 2 points. One, when you guys were talking about the value of healthcare data, the reason it's so valuable is because it's more extensible in other attack vectors, right? So healthcare fraud, it's still a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? We talk about cybersecurity, but healthcare fraud is a billion-dollar industry. And so with health records, being able to go get your kidney operated on because you've got, and you can pay for that on the black market, right, is something that happens. So getting healthcare records is important because of those things, right? That's what attackers are looking at.
Yeah.
How many people in here have checked their parents', right, credit reports? You haven't. So if you can get the health records of people of a certain age or older, because you know they're on a fixed income most of the time, or they're not looking at things that we would typically be looking at. So health records will always be the most expensive record and the one that's the most attacked. It just, unfortunately for us, happens to be that panacea of health records being the most important and healthcare entities protecting them not being on par with a lot of other verticals.
Yeah, CMS said $20 billion is lost in healthcare fraudulent claims a year.
So second part is I'm going to challenge Malcolm a little bit. So I agree that we should own it, but I think that we should only own it if you are doing your due diligence as a CISO to bring risk to life. There are many CISOs who go sit in the seat and they wear the hat, but they don't really do anything to do the due diligence and bring it to life. You have to hold others accountable. Because then if you're holding others accountable, then ultimately you shouldn't be the guy getting fired.
Absolutely.
Because you are the person who brought it to light and made everybody aware. Now, if you are not doing that, then you should be fired.
But I think what Malcolm was referring to was transparency. If you will go to the management committee and explain the risk and the fallout from that risk, and if the management makes a decision saying that, no, we feel that buying a state-of-the-art MRI machine is more important than investing in putting in these controls and something were to happen, they made an educated decision, and they can at least, you know, look at you and say, you did the right thing, and as a business leader, and we'll deal with the consequences.
Yeah, but how many times does that happen? Many of us, right, we can raise our hands, have gone and had that conversation, and then an incident happens and they look at you and, how did that happen? Why did you allow that to happen?
I think they asked the CFO the same thing. They asked the business development the same thing. How did you lose out on that deal? How did that happen? I mean, that happens, I think, generally across the board. It's just not CISOs that are fielding those questions.
You know, when I took on this role 4 years ago, the first piece of advice I got was to give the best advice you can in identifying risks, advise them on how they can mitigate the risk, if not totally mitigate the risk, to at least remediate it down to an acceptable point. However, if they do not follow that advice, you hand them a risk acceptance form. They've just accepted that risk themselves, right? Now there's no question about who owns the risk. I don't want to own any risk. I want to deal with the risk. I'll advise you on what you should do. But it's not for me to dictate the risk tolerance of the organization. It's for the appropriate group to do so.
Can't do that for my household. How am I going to do it?
Final comment.
Hi, I'm Mary Ann Blair, Carnegie Mellon University. So I'd like to kind of go back through your whole talk and make a couple of observations and then ask a question on a new topic. So on the cybersecurity or cyber liability insurance. So I have found that that single activity increased my budget by $250,000, right? I consider the fact that we now have coverage to add to my overall budget. I consider the fact that in order to really make good on the insurance, I had to develop a retainer with an incident response firm, and I can use any unspent funds in a given year for other security services. So if you haven't explored that, I would suggest exploring that. I think the other thing it did was create a partnership with enterprise risk as well as the insurance folks, one that did not exist before, and it also raised their understanding of the challenge of both filling out an application, where all of the data lives, the degrees of control, and now I have an advocate and a partner and a spokesperson. So I think even if you go through the exercise and decide against it, it's a great opportunity when we think about aligning with the business. This is a great opportunity to align and yourself become informed about other opportunities to cover some of your costs and insurance you already have, which was something that was revealed to me. You probably already have coverages that you may not be aware of that you can call on. So I would explore that with your insurance folks if you haven't. On the issue of diversity in our workforce, so if we have daughters and nieces and granddaughters, so that's the place to think about starting. I'd commend the conference. It is so wonderful to see women in the proportions that we are here. I would challenge to have more women at the podium. When you asked that question, I felt really uncomfortable because I thought, boy, you have a whole bunch of people who could probably answer that question.
I didn't think anyone would notice that.
You don't think so? It was so. So if anybody
Irony.
Textio is, I don't know if folks are using this tool, but it helps you scan through your position descriptions and make sure that it's an inclusive description. You know, if you list 10 things in a position description, if this is research now, this isn't Mary Ann's own personal opinion. If a guy got one, he's like, okay, I got this. And women have to have all 10 or they won't apply. So we have to get better at how we describe a job and what the real expectations of that job is. Okay, so I'm like on my little soapbox. So my question to you all, where we're going, I have noticed in my 15 years as a CISO at Carnegie Mellon, a real shift in collaborating with law enforcement. You know, from the days of here's a subpoena and, you know, I want every IP to let me share my indicators of compromise with you so you can secure your environment, and if it's helpful and you have information you're willing to share back with us, that would be helpful. Can you all speak to the partnerships that you're developing either with your own ISACs or with your law enforcement and how that's helping you in your craft?
I mean, we are just becoming members of HISAC. We were relying on TLP Green for a long time because we felt we got more intel from our providers that we pay fees to into our SIM and contractually. But we do have a stronger relationship with the local law enforcement, FBI, Secret Service, local county and state police, and we do invite them on site to come and talk to the folks because FBI would tell you that if you have a larger incident, instead of going to IC3.org, whatnot, you have to call them and inform them, and then they'll help you. But you have to take the proper or I have to reach out to them, you have to go through your legal department to make sure that the information you're providing them is not something that the organization would not want to.
So I think from my perspective, we've had people on DIB and in kick for periods of time. And I think it's definitely valuable, especially from the threat landscape, especially focusing in on the same verticals that you're actually doing that, because that, if you're not targeted on the initial hit, you're going to be there in the next 90 days typically. So the vertical focus is actually really, really key. And the stair step is what we call it, is some of the kick down that occurs from the financial sector folks going after that and saying, okay, these no longer work, so we'll drop it to retail or someplace else and see where that comes into play. I firmly believe that it really sucks to be the last organization in a lifeboat of the world of cybersecurity, because that's what you're trying to do if you're not sharing the information. It's like, hey, this is going to make me better. Well, it really sucks that you're the only one still around on that side of it. So share as much as you can. Talk to other CISOs. We do it in Chicago. We do it in different places where everybody knows everybody and gladly will, have you seen this? Have you seen this? Are you seeing this? Because it's so important, and you bring it up not from a law enforcement perspective, DOD, you can name names, but as a global entity as well, you have the same thing across the world, and you have to adjust accordingly to that. So providing that intel and everything else is critical wherever you're going to do, because anything can actually help.
Yeah, we have to work really closely with law enforcement. We have a few contracts with some major government entities, and it's required, number one. But in Chicago, for instance, we have our CISO community is very strong. We do more things than just get together and talk shop too. We socialize with each other. But that camaraderie keeps us all safe because we actually challenge each other constantly. And that's a great thing.